And you're laughing. One big fish, eight pieces of fish. Done.
And I don't know how that happened. I caught the fish and you cleaned it. So.
Because I know how to do this, you would have butchered it. So,
Thanks, Jim.
plain and simple.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
So,
Jim Stevens,
Kevin,
how the heck are you?
doing great. So, as we were preambling earlier, I kind of wish that there was a bit more freedom to be in the outdoors, but it'll come in due time. So,
Well, the big question is, you must have a spare tent hanging around, like Eureka, Canada, for heaven's sakes. Have you been camping in the backyard?
I haven't, but I've had some good interactions with some customers through emails who come through the Canadian site, and I answer all the emails. And one fellow just asking questions about a family tent, and I just love these types of individuals. It's the big Bon Echo Tour 600. It's quite a large family tent. And finally, that's the one he bought and had it shipped to his house. And then he had another question. He goes, "Yeah, I set it up in the basement." And I just love people who do this. Like, just, the family tent up in the basement. He was just asking, about one of the features and, any experience with that. But then his girls were bugging him now that they want to camp out with him in the basement. So I haven't had mine up, but people obviously have. So, and I have a feeling as the weather keeps improving, at least you can go in the backyard if you have access to one. So,
yeah. And even if you live in a condo or an apartment, you could pitch it I figure if you pitch it in the living room with a fake campfire going on the TV and just have John Denver playing around you.
Yeah, it's close.
Now, it's a whiskey chat. I'm running low, but there's also a reason why I have this. This is not my favorite whatsoever because it's not even a Scotch. It's a Canadian whiskey with an E. But yeah, my uncle Tom passed away last night, and he lived in Oregon. And when he visited, oh, that's a lot better than this. My Lord.
I was ready, Kevin.
Oh my Lord. Okay, this pandemic.
To your uncle.
Right. Yes. Yeah, he always wanted me to bring him, or when he came here, get him some Canadian rye. I'm not really a rye drinker. I'm not drinking it with Coke because that's just a sin.
Yeah.
All right. Questions. I've been doing a lot of these.
Okay.
It's crazy. It keeps me out of trouble. So, who started you? Where did you start? Why did you just start going off and doing camping, wilderness trekking, and things like that?
It's so growing up, I had the wonderful experience, as many people have, of parents that kind of introduced me to camping, and then as probably 10 or 11 years old into canoe tripping, and then that's kind of been with me for the rest of my life. And but it was always kind of the what I'll call the hobby side, or the kind of do it on your own time side of things. And my schooling was actually, post-secondary at York with physical education towards coaching. So it's interesting that that coaching side is what I've actually used for the rest of my life as hobby, because I've done tons of coaching. And what I did as a hobby growing up became what I actually do for a career. So it just, things kind of flipped, but it's been fun. So I guess I credit my parents, but came out of the university and kind of, what am I going to do? Didn't really at the time, the coaching options were limited. I'm a pretty old guy, and back then it wasn't, that lucrative. So I just started in something I knew about, which was outdoor retail, and found out that I enjoyed doing that and selling, but I had a real keen interest on kind of product. So after a few years at retail and learning that side of the business, I sent out I think 10 resumes with a cover letter that my dad kind of told me, my first one, he crumpled up, threw it away. I get lots of resumes across my desk, and that one goes into don't bother reading pile. So he said, you got to sell yourself. You're going into sales. So don't lie, but sell yourself. So yeah, I did that and sent it out to 10 companies. And number one on the list was Eureka, and got a call back, and their timing was right. So got hired on as a, kind of internal sales rep for Ontario back, that's probably 1992 or 93. So I am dating myself, but, and then from there was with them for a number of years, got a call from a competing company, went to them for 3 years, and then got a call back from Eureka saying, we changed our structure. We really think you would like what we're doing now, and came back into the role that I'm in today. And so I've been doing this for about 20 years. So.
Wow. Now, so people don't really realize about walking into your office. Like when you walk into your office, it's not an office. It's a bunch of tent designs everywhere, a bunch of gear designs, and you're always thinking, and basically you are Eureka Canada. You actually are the ones that actually creates these tent designs and stuff. There's probably a lot of people behind the scenes, whatever, but to walk in your office, you can't see the floor or your desk. It's full of camp gear. And to think about it, isn't that far better, I guess, than you wearing Adidas shorts and a whistle being a coach?
Well, I would agree with that. It's, I believe me, I really enjoy coaching. It's been quite rewarding, but to your point, it's a lot of fun over the years to be involved in the product. Sales managers today actually wouldn't have that opportunity. I was kind of given a bit of a free rein to some degree, kind of under the radar, as it was often said, for my US bosses. But they knew that I was passionate about it. I was a canoe tripper and an outdoors person myself. And I had a real quality bar or design bar or whatever level that I would maintain, and I wouldn't allow things to go underneath that. And so in other words, if I wouldn't feel comfortable using it, happy to own it, why would I want to sell it? So I kind of took that approach. But to your point, you come in, yeah, there would be a whole bunch of different designs on the go. Some that were, they're kind of in the last sign-off stages, and other ones that were a wish and maybe they're going to happen, but in the end might not have. So.
Well, what were some of those? I think going back in time, I know your El Cap tent was one of the best sellers years ago. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I also remember you created a tunnel tent, and I might be wrong, but I'm thinking it just didn't work for you.
Well, actually, the El Cap is still one of our top selling units. It comes in that 3 sizes, and and that started though from just a basic 2-pole dome, fly rod, no vestibules. And back when I was sales rep and not in the current job, I just kind of, I would listen to what I was hearing from retailers and other people. And vestibules weren't big at that time. They were starting, but not that big. And I just kind of looked at one design that we had and tweaked it around and did some, I'm not an artist or drawer, but done some sketches kind of, and told my boss at the time, I said, I think this is what we need. And so we had that made, and the original model's name back in the 90s was the Heideloft. But then it changed into the El Capitan series in around 2000, and it's been going strong ever since. So, but the one you're talking about, I think, is called the Tunnel Vision. And at the time, the current position I'm in, I also got involved with our European division on products because we had very similar ideas. And so I had designed a larger tent for the European market. And then when I got the sample back home here and set it up, and I looked at it and go, didn't really like the sleeping portion of it at all, but I loved the vestibule. And then I took another closer look, said, why don't I just make it repeat the vestibule on both sides? So it's basically 2 vestibules put together, and that became the Tunnel Vision. And we actually sold that in Canada quite well for about a 6 to 7, maybe 10-year period. That was the time when I had younger kids at the time, so that was our provincial park tent, and it was quite fun because we would have it set up. And my wife, love her dearly, learned quickly, don't block the view, because people walking by saw it, and it was so unique at the time that they would come in and start asking questions. So here I am setting up the campsite, and I've got our little utility trailer blocking the view. And she goes, why are you putting that there? No one can see the tent. Oh, sorry. But it was a kind of one that, it was a design I was working on, but it came out from part of the design that worked, and then being in the position I was in to be able to make it happen, it developed into the full tent and sold quite well. Also did very well in Europe. So
there was a time where you had a tent with just one entrance, and you said nobody wanted it because they couldn't escape if a bear came in.
Well, actually, for me, I don't know if I would have been the one to have said that. I've heard that mentioned. But I mean, people have said that numerous times when they would see a single door tent and kind of, but my comment back to them, was, I don't think bears really are going to come in your door. If they're going to come into your tent, they're just going to swat the fabric and they're in. They're not kind of coming neatly through your vestibule and opening the zipper. So now they might be curious and kind of poke their head and sniff. So I can understand that. But I think it was you in different talks that the tents I grew up were the original Timberlines, and you slept with your head, at least in the two-person Timberline, with your head at the door, and if it had a vestibule, so both people would have their head at the door. So getting in and out of the tent in a single-door tent was no problem. You just kind of crawl out the front and you're done. But in the newer tents where it's all side entrance, that person sleeping on the back has to climb over the other person. So that's why you'll still get single door tents. It's all about cost and weight efficiency, but everything pretty much is now two doors. So.
Well, if someone was just about to get a tent, and what are the key questions they would ask?
Well, I actually will ask the questions back. I want to know what is the primary function you're buying a tent for? And so get right down to the specifics. So can you say at 80+% of the time it's for canoeing, June through August, or is it going to be that you're 50% times for that, but you're definitely going to be doing the shoulder seasons, or even getting into sub-zero temperatures. So and then what is it? Is it canoe tripping? Is it backpacking? And if you're doing both, are you leaning to fewer backpacking trips and a lot more canoeing, or vice versa? Because all those questions will dictate, my mind, the type of tent you should be looking at. And the one thing I'll always hear is people, they focus in on weight as the key criteria right at the beginning on the smaller tents. Hugely important, but if you buy a lightweight backpacking tent and you're wanting to use it in the colder seasons when you're getting down into the 0 degree, maybe below, well, chances are that lightweight tent, the interior of it is all mesh. There's no breathable fabric. And guess what's going to come through that mesh a lot easier? Cool, drafty winds. So all of a sudden now you need maybe a warmer sleeping bag and more layers of clothing to sleep in. So you've saved weight on the tent, but you have to take more weight in your gear. So you got, it's a lot of questions back and forth to dial into what you really should be buying.
Yes. The dog slept with me last night. Didn't you, Ollie? Yeah, he was shivering, so he went inside my sling bag. Christine tried to do the same, but I said, look, there's not enough room for you, the dog, and me and my sling bag. So I brought her an extra sleeping bag just in case she got cold, and she's got that one on, the other one on, and something else. I don't know. I don't even know if that's the same person that I went to bed with. So now you know why that sleeping bag was on sale, by the way.
It wasn't bad. It just got to be like 0 last night. It's funny.
The sleeping bag is rated to -9.
Yeah, but I think that's like -9, like survival -9.
Maybe it's -9 in French.
Maybe.
It was cold.
And then space is the other thing. The canoe trippers tend to want and will choose tents that give them a little bit more elbow space because the canoe's carrying it. Portages are typically not massively long, not like the one we did at Algonquin Park that one time. But so whereas true backpacking tents, I get it. You're going to have tighter confines because you need to get it down a little bit lighter. So, and family tents, it's there's similar questions that you can be asking. Do you want again, is it just strictly July and August? Well, then you're probably happy with a tent that really doesn't have a full fly. It's still waterproof, but you'll get maximum ventilation. But if you're going a little bit longer season and rain is number one, then yeah, big full fly and probably some vestibules included. So so there's a lot of questions that need to be in back and forth. And what I love about it, I find the customers that I love doing outdoor shows where the buying customer comes and sees the displays and can make their purchases. But I'm very impressed with how well educated the people are when they come. They've done their homework and they've gone to websites and they've checked videos. So they have most of their question answered. Now they want to touch and feel and then maybe talk to someone just on a couple key features before they make their final choice.
So I have Jim Stevens from Eureka here with us, a good friend of mine. And Gary, have you met Jim here?
I have not met Jim. It's a pleasure for you to meet me.
Well, so what about, I'm not talking brand name, whatever, but what's some things that they should avoid, like sort of a warning sign when they see a tent of not to buy it?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant if a company doesn't say what their waterproof coating levels are. I would walk away. And that's typically going to be with your entry-level tents. If it doesn't say that, they might say water repellent. Well, that's different from waterproof. It just drives me bananas when I see a tent out in a park and someone's got this tent and then they just tossed on top of it a blue polyethylene tarp. And I kind of go, like, why didn't you just get a little better tent in the first place? Then you don't need that tarp for put over your tent. You can put it over the picnic table or someplace else. But those are some of the things I'd be looking at. I mean, you can look more closely at stitch count, and that is a telltale sign. So the more stitches per, say an inch of section on a tent, the better. But because what happens at production lines, if a production line has to do tighter stitches, they'll produce fewer tents. Cost of the tent goes up. So you can kind of tell if it's got say 4 or 5 stitches per inch. Chances are there's a whipping them through, and that is going to be reflected in the rest of the quality of the product. So most of the what I call brand names, so not the entry level price points, do a pretty good job with all of the construction. So the stitching's good, the waterproof coatings are good, the tape seams are good, the frame qualities are good. So it's really then boils down to feature type things that you're looking for in a tent. So.
What about the big debate? I know I have it a lot on social media. Do you put the ground sheet inside the tent or put the tent on top of the ground sheet? I put the tarp inside the tent, not outside the tent, and I lay it down on the ground. That's because if it rains and the water comes seeping through the floor, which it will, doesn't matter how much money you spend on a tent, eventually that will happen. You have a barrier between you and your thermarest. If you put the tarp on the outside of the tent, it just creates a gathering place for that water. I just don't get that. So this is what I've always done.
I do the ground sheet on the ground. In my argument, you have to make sure that when you do that there's the ground sheet is, if you haven't bought a fitted one designed for the tent, that it's got to be tucked under so there's no chance of it catching any rainwater and bringing it under and pooling it under your tent. But I put it down first because if there's going to be any damage happening, I want it to happen to the replaceable footprint and not to the actual tent floor.
Okay. I disagree, but I will talk to Cliff Jacobson about that in the next couple of days when I'm going to interview him.
Well, I know people like the idea of doing it inside because they can pick up and take all the dirt out with them after they're done. I would say the time when I would be bringing the footprint inside is when the tent is starting to show its age and the floor is no longer 100% waterproof. And then I would bring the footprint on the inside. But for the first number of years, 10 years or whatever, I would be having it outside. So.
Okay. What about aluminum poles versus fiberglass?
We've only, in our main line, we only do aluminum frames now. It's not that they can't break, but they're less prone to breakage. It's usually when they break, it cannot be a combination of user error or just extreme weather conditions. But fiberglass, and there's different grades of fiberglass as there are aluminum, but the fiberglass can dry out and split. And if you end up using them as in that, and you might not even see it in that kind of situation, and the temperature is cold or windy, you could be in for a bit of a surprise. But that said, we've sold fiberglass tents for many years that have performed quite well. But given the choice between the two, I'm going to choose aluminum. I just a little bit more money, a little easier to set up if you're doing anything that was pull sleeves and such, and lighter weight. So, I would go that direction.
What's going on?
It's moving day. We're leaving this beautiful campsite and moving to another beautiful campsite.
Christine, how far did we move our campsite?
What?
How far did we move our campsite?
30 feet?
But look at the view we got for tonight. Look at that.
Well, what would be the best way then to set up a tent to make sure it's more weather or waterproof during a storm?
Well, it's first off, what the tent is that you bought, and then and as we talk in many of our videos, you're leaving the site for a period of time, or a storm's coming. Guy lines you've got the guy line loops on the outside of the fly for a reason, and the guy line ropes are included, as are the stakes. Use them. So that probably more than anything. If the fly design in itself is designed to address water and storm conditions, then just by adding on those guy lines makes a huge difference. So.
And the rain is starting to come pelting down. And as you can see on the northern breeze, it's just sheeting off. There is some wind, but there's absolutely no motion to the shelter. It is properly guyed out using 2 ropes off of each shoulder in an inverted V pattern. Kind of halfway through the storm, gonna go inside. I'm not sure if you can hear the rain pounding on the outside of the fly sheet, but inside, perfectly dry.
What about putting your tent towards the wind? So would the water come in through the zipper the first place? Would that be the first place if it was going to come in?
If the zipper is exposed, like a lot of the tents now have zipper flaps, so it would take you can get a real driving horizontal wind that might lift up the zipper flap and water can get on the zipper. I haven't over my career heard too many concerns from customers with that at all. But is it possible? Yeah. Typically, I think what you want to do if your tent is different symmetry to it, you want to line, if it's going to be a continually westerly facing or westerly wind, set it up so that it's going to be the most aerodynamic and facing into that wind direction, which in this part of the world is typically from the west.
Now, what about 3-season, 4-season? What's the big difference? Is it worth buying a more expensive 4-season if you're going to go winter camping just one weekend?
I think you buy a 4-season winter tent if you're really doing a lot of winter camping and in what are the more extreme conditions. So 4-season tents, they have to be, a strong wind load design. So geodesics are still and have been very popular for years. tent structure. They're one of the strongest available, so they can really hand a lot of wind. And even there, you want to guide them out if it gets crazy. But above tree line, altitude, you're going to see a lot of that type of tent. And they also can handle a heavier snow load. The other key things for four season is they must be full fly sheet, including vestibules. And then the internal mesh panels for ventilation must be able to close them off for them to be categorized as a four season. But to your point, if you're kind of up in your neck of the woods, up Algonquin area, and you're going out for a weekend winter trip, you don't have to have that tent. I still would highly recommend an aluminum frame design. And I would also recommend a tent that has the ability to close off interior mesh panels. That's one of the reasons why the El Capitan tent that we mentioned earlier is so popular. I kind of relabel those as four season below tree line. So you can get in and they'll handle the winter quite well because you can close off the internal mesh, their aluminum frame, their full coverage fly sheet and vestibule. You just have to be aware that if you get a heavy wet snow load, yep, you got to brush it off. But otherwise, it's fine. But some of our other three-season tents could work, but most three-season tents in the marketplace have a lot of internal mesh that you can't close off. And unless you can bank up snow to stop winds from getting in under the fly sheet, you could be in for a little chillier night. So,
but you've gained a lot of experience through your times in Eureka. You would think that you would learn how to fish during that time as well.
Okay, Jim, tell us what's up now.
Well, I've been trying fishing, but with no luck. Kevin told me this was a real good pull, but I don't know, I've questioned the water. So.
I know where this is going.
That's not true, actually. I'm just joking. You actually, Ashley and I, big time, every time we
Kevin,
go.
it was a good story. Good trip. Kevin took me in with good friends of ours. What were those? Was it the 5-kilometer portage, I think? So
yeah, we did the Dixon Bonfield. Yeah.
So and that was a good workout, but the fishing wasn't working the way we had hoped. So I introduced Kevin to something that I had just fluked onto on another lake on another fishing trip when I was going for walleye. Well, I'm not supposed to tell anyone how to do this, but it worked quite well.
Yeah, you really got a lot more fish. Well, even when we went to the Minadawan Trout Lake with your dad and your brother. Was it your brother or you just your friend? No, he's your brother.
No, it was my brother, yeah.
Yeah. You not only outfished me, but you out-filleted the pike.
Oh, you're cutting the top off first.
Yep.
I haven't seen that one yet.
You cut right down to the fin at the back. When you fry it up, these bones in here you won't even notice them. They're so soft, and small. It's not an issue. And then you can see what I refer to as the Y bone, and that's what everyone complains about. So you just find those, make your incision, and let kind of develop the feel. And when you get about this part, you can drop it down, and as you would any other fish.
You know how to fillet a pike.
Well, I had seen that years ago, demonstrated at the Toronto Sportsman Show, and just thought that makes sense. And I love catching pike, and I actually love eating pike. I love the flavor of pike more so than a lot of other fish. But yeah, it was. You hadn't seen it before, so I kind of you videoed and I showed you what I was doing, and it takes a little bit longer than filleting a walleye, but you get the 3 fillets off the pike and you got no bones. And
yeah.
Wonderful.
And your dad caught a monster pike, a monster.
Yeah, that was we estimated that at 29 pound and at 48 inches long.
And it was clear right away that it was a big one, and we didn't see it for a long time, and he was just taking us for a ride.
And then it would be right up to the boat, and then the
Couple
next thing it'd be 50 feet away.
Yeah. The guys in the other boats were starting to get excited as well.
Yeah.
On a little wee, rubber twister bait. So it must have just gone by its nose and it just opened up and snapped, because we got pictures and released it. But that thing could have eaten a full-size mallard duck. It was huge.
Oh, yeah, it was pulling the canoe for a good 20 minutes. I was about to leave.
Getting bored.
No, in fact, you landed it. I was like, you go ahead. And then we went into the interior, into the Naganosh area too, and we went to that secret walleye lake, which had no walleye. And I think your dad was sort of looking at me like, "I'll never go with you again."
Okay, Ken, so I'm going to ask you where we are.
We're on Duck Lake, I think, but we're all the walleye are.
Yeah.
And they're still there.
So it was a good portage in. We're supposed to be paddling, but my dad, he's not with us anymore. Of course, he passed a couple of years ago, but that was his 80th year, and he was out there still doing the 1.5 kilometer portages full pack. So it was pretty impressive. But he loved the trip afterwards. He just he was really glad to have been invited.
All right, joining me on Duck Lake is Ken.
Yeah.
And how were the portages, Ken?
Well, for an old guy, they weren't too bad because they didn't make me carry anything.
I was going to say, are you calling me old? I thought.
I'm the old guy. Yeah, they were okay.
They weren't too, well, we got our feet wet a bit.
Yeah. Well, once you got to the real portage, it was okay. It was getting to where the portage supposedly started.
Yeah.
Was the problem.
Well, yeah, because the information I had, by the way, was a little inaccurate. But we found it's a nice lake, though, eh?
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it was an awesome trip. So you think about it though, Jim, like, so basically you spent your days designing tents, promoting tents, talking to people at shows, really liking people's comments, and then you still go camping. And do you think an outdoor retail person should do that? Should they be a person that does what they say?
It's harder and harder for it to happen, unfortunately, but I really think if you are passionate about the product you sell, and you can do that without being a camper, I suppose, or a canoe tripper, but I don't know, there's nothing for me. I just value the experience, because then when I look at new designs that are coming out without having even used them, I can already feel what they're going to perform like. I still want to use them before you sell them, just because you might be surprised by something. But I just think I think you have a step up, better advantage, whatever you want to call it, by being, a user of the gear. You don't have to be so on the avid level or extreme level, but you need to be someone who gets out and uses it a few times a year. My biggest regret was I got to design and do all this, but I envied folks like you who were out there, 8, 10, 12 weeks of the year using it, and I couldn't get that time to do it. So, but it's still, I still think if you have a passion for it, and I really just think it helps you in the process. So.
Turn the stove up a bit.
Okay, Jim, talk us through the frying pan. Who carried it?
Let's see, that kitchen pack, that was me, I guess. So, but it does everything on our trips. We've done the lightweight route, but when it comes to being around the kitchen, when you got something that can do everything from making pizzas and bread to omelets, you take it.
Yeah. Well, was there any products that you guys sort of designed and created that you really thought, I'm not sure if this is going to work, and then it became the epiphany? It became like the big seller.
There was a few surprises along the way. The more recent one, and I knew it was going to be successful, and you've used it. It's the NoBug Zone canoe trip shelters, which were a revised version of an older model that we had.
It's a tarp with a bug mesh, no-seam black mesh attached to it, like so, and both together in a compression sack, weigh about 4 pounds. It's worth it. It's fantastic. What I do is in the summertime, when I don't need the mesh because the bugs aren't that bad, I just bring the tarp. So it's actually a good for the money. Open this up, go inside. This is my little oasis. I love this. This is fantastic. Man, you can eat in here. You can get a camp stove going to make your dinner. You can have a bush martini. You can relax, read. I've slept in this thing before, not even used a tent. I would never go on a spring trip without bringing this bug shelter. Love it.
And that was kind of, my wife and I were on a canoe trip up in the Massasauga Park, one of our favorite places to go. And I was sitting in, the one year I was sitting in what was the old VCS system, and kind of said, if we made these changes here, 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 I think I would like this structure, this setup better. And then the next year we were back in the same park, might have been the same site with the new sample, and I just said, I like this a lot better. And so took it out and to the marketplace, and well, it's done phenomenally well. Obviously, a lot of people thought, as I did, that this makes a lot of sense. So it was one that did better than I had thought it might, but I knew it was going to be received reasonably well. But for true surprises, trying to think in that, probably the Northern Breeze greenhouse. I didn't realize at the time, because that one I tweaked an earlier design that the USA had. They had a model called the Breezeway, and it was good quality and such, but the Canadian customer tended to want rain and wind curtains as part of the deal. They tended to want, like their tents, they wanted the seams taped and number 10, the big beefy zippers, not what traditional screen houses had been using. So I fooled around with that and kind of designed the Northern Breeze. And I knew that it was going to be because of the frame in itself, this is going to be an expensive shelter. So as the design went on, just kind of, okay, you know what? It needs this feature, and too bad about price. It's either going to sell or it's going to not, but it needs this feature, and we're already at this price point. It's going to add $10. Might as well. So we did it, and it's probably the most expensive screen house sold in Canada. I don't know that for sure, but I expect it is. And I've been blown away with the success of that unit. And I'll hear some, complaints, as you're always going to hear on a product, and I wish, we could tweak something, but overall, it's in the probably now tens of thousands of these have been sold. And I never envisioned that would be so popular, but I get it that, I used it all last summer up at our lot as our kitchen, and it performed unbelievably well. So, and I'd used it years before, so I knew it would. And I think people were just tired with the low cost screen houses that you ended up throwing away because of either bad quality or just frustrated with the setup. And so this is just addressed a lot of the features, and it has done phenomenally well for us. So yeah, I guess that would be the one that surprised, just on how popular it became.
I mean, you look at Eureka prices. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the elite or not. They're not crazy. I mean, that's why I've always liked Eureka, is that it's good quality product for the price you get, right? And so it's not an issue. You're not spending thousands of dollars for something. So what about the one idea that you just was in love with? You couldn't sleep at night. You would wake your wife up and say, "I can't believe I'm going to create this product," and then it went nowhere. Well, not nowhere, but not to what you thought.
Yeah, when I was thinking about that, there was one design that was there's probably 3 or 4 that kind of I kept the drawings and such, because I just did believe that at some time and place they would really resonate. One of them was a model that I called the Habitat, and it was taking our hexagonal screen house at the time and designing 2-person backpacking canoe tripping tents that could come in and fit on each 5 of the sides, leaving 1 open. And then so they would fit. You'd create a bug seal, so you would crawl out the end of the tent. You'd have one single door at the head of the tent, and you'd crawl out when all of it are fitting on the bigger modular. So you could have 5 of these around, sleeping 10 people, and then they would all open up and walk into a stand-up height protected central shelter. And so it was a design, and I had a sample made up and such, but I knew what the production minimums would be for something like this, and it wasn't going to be inexpensive. And I also knew that our U.S. division at the time wouldn't have interest, so I kind of had to, even though I was pretty excited about it, had to kind of let that one go. But the beauty of it was the central hub could be used separately as a screen house, And the modular pod tents, 2-person tents, could also be used separately on backpacking and canoe tripping trips. But then when you went to the family camp, you could use it all together and have quite a unique setup. But so that was one that didn't make it, which I wish in hindsight that it would have had a shot. So, and then one of the other ones was we had a ultralight tent that again was pretty cool. This was kind of at the forefront of the ultralight fabrics and such coming out. And it just, again, same thing. We, at the time, our product lineup was significantly different than our US counterparts. Since it's come together, they've kind of adapted a lot of the Canadian designs, which is kind of fun. But at that time, I couldn't carry this model by itself. Just couldn't do the production runs required, so I had to let it go as well. It was giving us a 2-person tent that at that time was coming in at the 3.5 to 4 pounds, which would have been pretty slick, but yeah, didn't happen. So.
I'm thinking of all the solo tents I had. Like I remember one of my favorite was the Spitfire.
Right behind me is the Midori solo tent by Eureka, and I thought I'd give it a test. I've always used a solo Spitfire, loved it. They don't make them anymore, so I thought I'd try the new one. And I love the Spitfire. I'm not sure why they're not making them anymore, but I was hesitant to use this one. I gotta say, I'm kind of liking it. A little bit more headroom, good ventilation, hasn't leaked at all, and it's rained constantly. Warm, yeah, it's got really good headroom. It's also got this little attachment where you hang things in, got side little pockets. Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think I'm liking it more than the Spitfire.
And yeah, you don't have those anymore. So there was no interest in that, or?
It, again, if I could get, because in the line, the problem with the Spitfire Duo or 2 is one of my, if I'm going lightweight tripping on a canoe trip and I want to do all portages guaranteed, we're just doing them once. So, you do canoe and pack, away you go. So it's a bit of a workout, but it's, don't want to do the portages twice. That would be my tent of choice, and I still own one. And the problem being, again, it gets down to manufacturing. I'm able to do a, what they call their minimum order quantity, which is several hundred, and I have to be able to sell that in a year. That's the mandate I'm given. And unfortunately, the Spitfire Duo, even though it was a beautiful design, didn't have real vestibule space, so your gear had to come inside with you or be in a waterproof pack outside. And it wasn't freestanding, even though it only needed 2 stakes to stand. It's not freestanding. People kind of, they just don't look at it, and I kind of think that's a bit of a mistake, but so I had to choose kind of between that design and another 2-person freestanding tent for about the same price. Well, the freestanding one is always going to win.
Yeah.
So.
Now, which you have now, which actually I really do like. It took me a while. It took me actually 2 years to get over my love affair with that tent. And yeah, but you're right. The whole compartments above you, and it makes a big difference. It really does. And
beautiful night, and Christine is getting ready for the morning.
What is wrong with that? I'm putting my clothes up here to be ready in the morning. That's where they go, up there.
I've been wearing the same clothes every day, and this is a 5-day trip, and I'm saying, like a 10-day trip, like, sorry, you wear like one shirt, and then the extra one is in your pack, and in case something happens. But tomorrow's day 4?
Yes. 4.
So you've got a new shirt. Now, what was the problem when you pulled it out of your bag? You had an issue with it.
Well, it was very wrinkled. No, really wrinkled.
She's like,
so I folded it. It's up there. It'll be.
Oh no, your shirt's wrinkled. Oh my lord. What shall we do? Well, I packed an iron.
You're just jealous because I have a clean shirt to wear tomorrow.
I have a clean shirt. I just don't pull it out and get it ready for tomorrow. It's like, never mind. I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much for coming on my trip with me to Algonquin Lake, Algonquin Park. Wrinkle shirt or not.
I mean, for a weight comparison, it's nothing really. So.
Yeah. So.
Now here's a question: who has final say on the colors of the tents for that year, or maybe 2 years? Is it you? Do you go back and have dinner that night, saying, "Oh my Lord, did I choose the right color this year?" Or
Well, color is a challenge, and more so for us in Canada, Eureka, over the years. It's changing more recently, as I said. The product line between the Canada and the U.S. is becoming more and more one, which is great. But when we were, for all the years I've been doing it, Canada only, color becomes a concern because not only are you have to do a minimum number of tents, probably a bigger picture is you have to order a minimum quantity of fabric. And so you kind of get into the color game where, wow, I got to order that much fabric, and I'm not so sure of that color. So, secrets being let out here. I often would tell my suppliers, because I wanted to make life as easy for them, I would say, okay, what they're making. So just so you understand, the factories that make tents do, you basically go in with your blueprints and you're buying their factory time, and so they'll make your tents, but they'll also make other quality brands as well. And so I would ask the factory, I'd say, tents that you're making for some of your European customers, what colors are you using? And so they would then send me color palettes. So oftentimes what I would do, I would choose amongst those colors for my Canadian models, because I could tag on to those fabric orders and not have to order quite as much.
That's
so it was kind of choices made on the practicalities of production that I had to work with. Now, we always had colors to choose from that were half decent, but I'll say in the design of a tent, the color is by far the hardest decision. Blue is always safe, but blue can also be boring. But most people don't kind of look at a blue tent and go, "Oh, that's ugly." Browns, if you don't get the right brown, they're kind of turn their nose up. I have no interest in that, or they love it because it blends in with, And then other people will look at a tent and say, "Well, I want it to pop out in pictures when I'm coming to the site. I want to be able to see it. So yellows and oranges and reds." And other people say, "Oh, I don't want to be seen. So I need a olive green," or So no matter what color you ultimately choose, you'll never please everybody. So.
Sorry. What about tent stakes? I mean, you've changed designs over the years. We all have. And then what are the ones that sort of, that didn't work, or?
Unfortunately, tent stakes are a challenge, because if it's canoe tripping tents or backpacking tents in this area of the world where a lot of it's done, you're on the Canadian Shield. So you can find some sites with soil for tents to get down into, but most times it's so shallow, the soil, you really don't want to disturb it, or you're on bare rock. So I would have liked to have included, the good old parachute cord, and because I've talked to people numerous times about tying that to the corners of your tent, and just waving some logs and tying off the log with, and it's weighted by rocks, because the stakes are useless for those trips. I've always then given the choice. I'd like a lighter weight aluminum one that won't bend easily. Apologies to those customers who might have gotten some tents 12 years ago when we got the tents in, and they unfortunately got through inspection and they were like spaghetti noodles. They were aluminum, but they bent really poorly. So we were sending out a lot of free stakes that summer. But my favorite one is one that is kind of like a little shoehorn stake, aluminum. I don't know why the name was a doggy stake, but that's what it was called. And those things were fantastic, and they were light, and you could stack them together. They took up no space, and they were my favorite stake. And I wish on the other side, on the family side of things, or shelter, I would love to have included nail stakes with a bunch of the family tents and shelters, because now with a lot of the provincial parks, they've got, it almost seems like that hard gravelly surface, and it gets compacted, and I understand it's pretty, tough to get a stake into that at the best of times, and realistically a big nail, a spike stake is probably the best alternative. With a hammer, just drive them in. But couldn't make that happen with the northern breezes. So that's after purchase, that's probably a wise choice to just have a pack of 4 of them if you're doing provincial parks. So
most campers just realize that too. They get the tent and then they buy something else that adds on to it, right? So
they learn kind of the terrain they're going, and you know what, I probably need to just add this to the package.
Now so Eureka Canada, just you're not just busy with tents.
No.
You do chairs, sling bags, mats, pillow. Your pillow is awesome. I think the best pillow.
All right, this is the pillow. Not bad for coming out of that. Lightweight for sure. And I'll let you know if it's cozy tonight. And it's also got stealth grip, and what that really means is it's abrasive on the bottom so it doesn't slip and slide all over the tent.
It's a fun. So, and we also do more recently now that we branched out into the stove category.
Yeah. So Jetboil, you got into Jetboil like 2 years ago, or maybe 3?
Jetboil, we as a company we bought about 10 years ago.
You turn it on by this knob, and when you turn the gas on a bit, there's an ignition system. Okay, so you click on, and it's on. Actually, I'll do that right now. And it's on. What do you think, dog? Woo! 10 years, what?
Yep, and I've had it, and I've been running it along with Eureka in Canada for around 7 years.
Okay.
And it's been doing phenomenally well, and like it should. It's quite an innovative and well-designed product. But the same engineers, and they're great fellows in Manchester, New Hampshire. No ladies in engineer design yet, but the engineers there also have designed all of the new Eureka stoves. So the new Ignite stoves, the Gonzo grill, they're all from the same Jetboil DNA. So.
Yeah, they're awesome actually. And the whole idea when you created, well, my Lord, I'm getting old. I thought it was only like 3 years ago, not 7. But I guess a couple of years ago, where you were able to control the simmer on the Jetboil.
A regulator. So a regulator, just like the old propane stoves that you'd have at the camp, the Coleman stoves, right? It regulates the heat more, so you can simmer it down and even cook as opposed to just boil it up and put hot water in a bag and make a meal.
Made a huge upscale on that stove.
Yeah, it became Jetboil for so many years was really for trail hiking, like speed. The Appalachian Trail is where it originated, and for some altitude use. But it was all about quick to boil. So we still have that. We have some amazingly fast stoves in the Jetboil line to boil your water for, your rehydrating your meals and cooking. But more recently, they are recognizing that a lot of people might want to slow down on some of these trips. And also there is a canoe tripping market that they're recognizing, and other markets where people want to cook more so than just boil water. So they added the regulator to a bunch of the stoves. So there's a series all with the last 2 letters, MO, so the Mo series of stoves in the Jetboil line, and they all have the regulator, and you can simmer right down to doing rice and then crank it right up to doing full out boil. So, and with all those ones, most of the systems come with the pot adapter. So if you take off the cooking vessel that comes with, you can pop on the pot adapter and then use other pots and pans. So,
mind you, Speedoman is not allowed to borrow. Well, actually, I borrowed a tent. No, sorry. Oh my Lord, I only had one scotch. I borrowed a Jetboil stove off Ian, one of your sales reps, lives down the road, right? Great guy. And so Ashley did something wrong. Come on, tell the story.
Yes, for once, he's not responsible for this. I didn't even know it was on the bottom of there. And like I can't even see. I don't even have my glasses on, but oops. Sorry.
It's the Jetboil Stove, and there's a base to it. And Ian Holmes, a friend of mine, I borrowed the stove off
any
him.
longer.
Borrowed the stove off him, and he said, "Yeah, you know, I know you wouldn't do this, Kevin, but just make sure that you take the plastic piece off the bottom where you melt it."
And then I brought it back to Ian. He goes, "Yeah, no more rental stoves for you." No. But speaking back to Speedo Man, remember the very first trip we did? We're on that trip in Algonquin we're on Lavier actually at the time. We went from Dixon to Lavier. And yeah, I said, look, I knew you at shows, but we had never tripped before. And I said, for the love of, like, don't do anything stupid, man. And what did he do? He wore a Speedo and he jumped over your head several times wearing the Speedo. So sorry for that. Yeah,
he was, Ashley's a great guy. So he just, yeah, but yeah, that was kind of my introduction to Speedo Man. I got the live version and kind of, yeah, once was good.
Well, you outfish them, so that's an important thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, for Eureka, so basically you've got some new products out now this year, which obviously people saw at the Toronto show and stuff, but then we haven't gone out, and we might not be able to go out for another month or not. Right. But you have a new tarp system.
Yep.
And
in the new line, there's we continue with the NoBug Zone canoe trip shelters in the 2 sizes, but there's also some trail flies, so some, 10 by 14 and 10 by 10 trail flies, because we know not everyone needs the complete bug shelter, so we've got some of those finally. And then the other one is we've introduced some new NoBug Zone shelters. Our U.S. division who designed these love the NoBug Zone name, so we now have, these are kind of your more traditional screen shelters. And what I like about them is that the one complaint I would hear from the customers is they love the Northern Breeze and our hexagonal shelters that we've had, but you and I, Kevin, the height of the door to get in wasn't a huge issue, but I would turn and talk to so many people who were north of 6 foot tall, and they would always have to bend down. So on these new designs, they actually elevated the height of the door entrance. So we're probably at least 6 foot height entrance. It might be a touch higher than that. And I know for those folks that they'll kind of appreciate that ability to be able to hardly bend their head at all to walk into the screen shelter. So it's something, you listen to people over the years at shows, and when you can deliver the design or the feature in a design, it's kind of fun. Now, the other one I like, they're in that same NoBug Zone shelter. There's one of the models is called the 3-in-1. And why I like this one, and it's an idea I have had for years, but I'm glad the U.S. chose to do it. It's a screen shelter, and basically in the concept of a tent, it's got a fly sheet over the top. And why I like that so much, and you also have the optional rain wind curtains, but the fly sheet just creates it stops the heat from getting right inside the shelter. So it's just going to have a wonderful cooling effect to the shelter. So some nice touches.
Yeah, I just thinking back to I remember going on that trip with your dad, and we brought the bug shelter, and you put it up, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, I didn't know you put high ends up, low ends down, and I used that for a few years before that, and then I went back home and I went on a trip with my daughter. She was really young at the time, and I'm putting the shelter up, and she goes, Dad, you're doing something different. I went, yeah, I figured out how to do this. Who taught you? The guy that designed it.
So, could you tell people how to put up the bug shelter, the Eureka bug shelter, or NoBug Zone? NoBug Zone.
The NoBug Zone.
Yeah, there's a trick to it that I did not know when I first got this, and then I figured it out.
It's easy once you know the trick.
All right.
So it has 4 corners, but 2 corners are high and 2 corners are low. So we have to find 2 high points and tie those 2 high corners as high as you can. And the low corners are the corners that have the logo on them. And those corners you have to tie low. So it's just 4 points, but as long as you get the high, high, and the low, low, it's a perfect
Okay, so the high
square.
points is the high points where the entrance is?
Yes, it is. So also face that if you can, like, well, there's an entrance on each side. So if you can face that where you want to enter and exit.
So if you do 4 corners like a regular tarp, this would not work.
No, 2 have to be high and 2 have to be low. Because if you don't do that, the screen will not evenly touch the ground. Because the floor print is a square, but the walls are not squares. It's 2 high corners, 2 low corners. The doors are the high corners, and the logo is the low corners.
Well, I mean, I've had to kind of loosen up when I would go on canoe trips, and we would invite other couples along, or my kids coming along. I'm not normally kind of, really, on, I don't want to say the impolite term, but I'm not usually hard about how things get done. I'm pretty easygoing, but when it came to setting up tents, it had to be done right. And finally, my kids would say, Dad, we would like to do this ourselves. So, okay, so walk away.
That's classic. Man, well, that's a great way to end it. Well, one last question. You know what? It's funny. I have a script every single time I do this. I didn't even look at the script at all this time. Well, we talked about what's new. Yeah, you know what?
I think we did well.
We did. Cheers, my friend.
Yeah, Kevin, and yeah, I'm glad you're doing this. This is kind of a fun way for people still to think and dream about being outside, even though we're kind of stuck inside at the moment. But eventually it's going to happen, and I just hope everyone can get out there and have a great time. So that's what it's all about. Cheers.
I just remember, Jim, years ago, we've been doing shows for years. And I remember the bug shelter, and I brought it on a trip with my buddies.
Oh,
and I'll never forget the moment where they're like, "What's this? Well, you got another piece of gear, Kevin? Oh, whoa, aren't you fancy?" I was like, "Yep." And I started putting it up, and they're like, "Well, we never needed this before." I went, "What?" So I went inside and I started getting everything ready to make dinner inside the shelter, and they're out with their bug jackets and bug spray, and they're begging to get in that thing, begging, right? And to that day, for them to come into my shelter, they have to give me a dram of whiskey. And that had to go back into the early 90s.
So, well, if I could finish with one story, and it's also kind of from shows, and it was at one show, and this has got to be probably 12 to 15 years ago, and we had at the time the Northern Breeze 12. It was in the early stages of the life of that particular model, and I'm doing this show, and I love to do the show, so I'm at the show, and over a 3-day period, I must have had about 12 people tap me on the shoulder and they said, I hear you are the designer of this. Yeah, I said, have you ever thought of doing this in a 10 by 10? And I kind of, by the 3rd day and the 12th person, kind of, eventually I listen, and I'm kind of, okay, what's going on? Am I on candid camera or something? Because it's just weird that many people asking for a smaller size. So finally, I asked a few of the people who were asking me about it, and I said, why? And they said, well, we want to put it on our cottage deck, and we need it 10 foot to fit. So, to those folks who might be kind of listening in on this, who may have talked at shows, we listen, because a lot of the good ideas would come from just, conversing back and forth. And where possible, it was a lot of fun to put it into a design. So that's how our Northern Breeze 10 kind of came to fruition. And it wasn't just kind of I had this brilliant idea. It was a whole bunch of other people had a great idea. And I just had the wherewithal and the position to make it happen. So yeah. Well, that's a huge part of the fun. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So
well, cheers to 10 by 10.
All right. Cheers.
And I hope you learn how to fish soon.
Yeah, me too.
Christine, what seems to be the idea, the problem here? There is a problem. What happened?
Well, Kevin decided that his head had to face north.
No, that's a world-renowned point.
I've
No,
never heard of that
the
before.
rotation of the Earth. You have to have your head facing north, or you don't get a good night's sleep. You have nightmares.
Okay, so I had everything facing south. Apparently, but now everything has to face north.
Are you all right?
It's 18 degrees out.
We're worried about freezing.
I know.
Way too warm.
Okay. Well,
Oh, wait a minute. No, I think it's supposed to be the other way.